Hello, it's Cameron here again today. Slightly different video today. I'm just going to be doing a presentation really on Agile, which is basically a type of project management, which sort of I had experience in a couple of years ago. It's something that I really believe in, and I think I know it's being adopted a lot more in recent years, and I definitely think going forward, it's going to be really big, especially in sort of financial institutions, which are sort of really struggling to adopt it at the moment. I know that some are, but I definitely think going forward, it will replace a lot of Waterfall projects, and I know it's something that a lot of firms are looking into. So anyway, yeah, here's my presentation on Agile concepts. So if we start at the beginning, the idea is that this is the way that project management used to be done. So you used to have three pillars, and it's basically projects need to be done on time. So the project needs to be done in under 12 months. On scope, project needs to be done with X, Y, and Z features. And on budget, the project needs to be done for less than $10 million. And these basically form the pillars of Waterfall projects, which is how projects were done for a really long time. Now, a lot of organizations still do them. So the problems with Waterfall is all about feedback and the lack of it. So if you look at the diagram there, you can see that you've got a stage of Waterfall: define, build, release. I think traditional Waterfall actually has two more, but you get the general idea. And as you can see, the risk goes up basically exponentially. Risk of the project goes up exponentially as you do this, because you've gone so much longer since you've actually spoken to the customers at the start. Your assumptions are becoming more and more out of date. You're putting more and more money in, and you don't even know if anything you've produced is even any good. And you can see that at the very end, like the value is only delivered right at the end of a Waterfall project, which means you have no idea if the stuff you're building is actually any good. So yeah, that's the main problem with Waterfall. And the best part is, if you you get to this thing at the value at the end, it's hit all these parameters. Oh yeah, it's on time, it's on scope, it's on budget, and you give it to them. You're like, here you go, enjoy yourself, and they just do not care at all, because you haven't spoken to them at all except for that contract at the start, and you really have no idea whether they're not even going to use it. Like, you haven't spoken to them at all. So Agile comes along, which was basically a bunch of software developers getting tired of making things which people weren't using, and that sort of thing. Like, they just got really fed up with it. So they basically came up with some principles to address it, which along came Agile, which is all about feedback. So Agile basically has these four core principles. So it's individuals and interactions over processes and tools, working software over comprehensive documentation, customer collaboration over contract negotiation, and responding to change over following a plan. So I'm going to talk through each of these and explain what they mean. So individuals and interactions over processes and tools is basically prioritizing the conversations that teams have within teams, and teams have with other teams, and teams have with customers, over any sort of rigid process and tools, which can often be quite obstructive and bureaucratic. So let's say you're in a development team, and you're coding and you're producing this amazing new product or whatever, and you think, oh, you know what we could really do with a salesperson or a product person from either of those teams to come in and say and get their opinion on this, like what sort of angle should we take on this. The idea is that your organization may be like, oh no, we work in these rigid teams, we don't really do that much communication or whatever, like you're not allowed to move teams or whatever. You should be free to move out of those processes and tools and those sort of rigid teams in order to benefit the individuals and interactions. And this is kind of a theme of it, is that you only do the things on the right to the extent that they're benefiting the things on the left. So you should be free to move outside of your team if it benefits those individuals and interactions. So now if we move on to working software over comprehensive documentation, this is the idea that you actually want to get a final product or a final usable product out in front for your customers to use, over any sort of writing stuff down, writing documentation, writing what we're going to do, writing whatever. Like, so the idea behind that is, once again, with feedback. So if you can get a working software out in front of something, and it's sort of almost like a husk of a final product, it might just only have like the main important features, and that's usually how it works, just getting those main important features out there, and then you get their feedback, and they say, oh, we could do with this feature, we could do with that feature, this feature needs to be changed, this bit needs to be improved, that sort of thing. And then you work with that, rather than having comprehensive documentation saying we need this, and this, and it all needs to be it all needs to be done, it all needs to be written down, or whatever. But yeah, that's the idea there. Customer collaboration over contract negotiation, and this is the idea that any conversations that teams have within themselves, or speaking to other teams, or maybe higher ups in their organization, these aren't going to be as beneficial as talking to customers, because the customers know what they actually want. And the idea is that, let's say you're making a project, and right at the start you speak to the customers, and you form a contract, and you say, oh yeah, we need this, this, and this. And you're like, okay, that sounds good. You begin producing it. You should constantly speak to the customers and get their input to find out what they want, if this is actually meeting what they want, that sort of thing. And that way, opposed to a waterfall project, when you actually give them the final product, and the final product that you make is actually much more likely and is going to much more closely meet the customer's needs. And so that's the idea of customer collaboration over contract negotiation. And then finally, responding to change over following a plan. This is the idea that you might have that contract negotiation at the start, like they said, which gives you a plan, and you think, oh yeah, we're going to do this, this, this within this amount of weeks, and whatever. But the idea is, if something new pops up, you should be free to adapt to it, rather than saying, oh no, we started this plan, like we've got to follow the plan. And the idea is that if you still have a plan, obviously, but let's say you're Netflix and you say, right, we're going to make this recommendations feature, and we're gonna add in, because we think customers want recommendations. So you add that in. Then let's say 2 months down the line, you think, oh, customers actually, you find out new information. Customers don't want recommendations. They want saved playlists which they can watch through. So you should be free to say, right, look, they don't want recommendations, let's adapt, let's go to this, without having to say, no, look, we've put 2 months in, we've got a plan here, we need to finish this. Like, that wouldn't be an agile approach. Whereas being able to respond to change and having the freedom to do that without having to consult higher ups or whatever all the time is basically a principle of agile. So those are the 4 core principles. And so if we look at what this means in practice, you can see what some popular but not prescriptive methodologies is, like Scrum. So this is the idea. You see the risk jumping there and there. These agile Scrum teams usually work in sort of 2-week intervals. So once every 2 weeks, they'll basically release that working software, and that way the risk is much, much lower. You can see it sort of bounces like that, because if they find out something doesn't work, they've only wasted 2 weeks of work. Whereas obviously with a waterfall project, the risk is going up and up and up and up, and you could create something which nobody wants at all. But there's other options, which is, so obviously you've got the Scrum with the sort of 2 weeks intervals, and you have meetings every morning, obviously, to discuss what you're going through. But then you've also got Kanban, which sort of works more reducing the work in progress, that sort of idea, where you sort of prioritize the most important thing and the thing which customers want, and you always keep that at the front of your project backlog, and you sort of pull those backlogs, you pull those projects through. That way, you're always working on the most important thing, and that's more of an idea which works around. It's less time bound, so I was going to say. But yeah, so now look at the bad, the ugly, and the good. So NHS Connected Health is a pretty renowned waterfall project. I'm not sure if it still is, but at the time it was the most expensive IT failure in history, and it was basically NHS's attempt to make electronic records of all sort of NHS customers, basically. And it was a massive failure. It was hugely inefficient. I think it cost, I can't remember how many billion. It was something ridiculous. It was but yeah, it was so it cost up to $12 billion, and it was budgeted, £12 billion, and it started at budgeted at $3 billion. It's actually impressive, because it's actually so unuseful and had value so little in mind that it's been completely scrapped and is not being used at all. So that was a pretty renowned waterfall project failure. But then DirectGov, which is the ugly, which is obviously it's not as bad as the bad, but DirectGov was basically a centralization of all the government's digital projects. And this was basically really, really poorly designed. It wasn't so much to do with time, but it was more the information across different parts wasn't synonymous. So different parts would be telling you to do different things. Different parts were telling you to do different things, and then also there was different logins to different parts of the website, so it wasn't all completely centralized, even though it was supposed to be. So that was obviously pretty ugly. But then gov.uk came in and basically prioritized value and came in providing value to customers, and came in, I think initially took control of 2 websites and then reworked those with the Agile concept, and it was like hugely successful. They met customer needs much better, and I think it was done much faster and for much cheaper as well. But yeah, it's actually been so successful. They're now doing work for the they've done work for the Justice Department, Transport Department, and Pensions, and they're currently doing work on taxes. And this is all quite funnily, it's all in the same time frame as it took NHS Connecting for Health to be completely useless. So yeah, to summarise all that, if you do all this, so if you shorten those feedback loops, focus on value, prioritise customers, and iterate and learn, you get the happy good times. But yeah, generally it's not, whilst it's not like a complete recipe for success, it is a methodology which can stop you making mistakes, basically, and really costly mistakes, as NHS for Health shows. But yeah, thanks for listening. That's my email if you've got any questions. But yeah, sorry about the little jit in the thingy. That's because the recording software I use only has 10 minutes for the free version, so I had to split it up into 2. But yeah, this is something I think you can actually see why this is sort of working quite well. I mean, I spoke to somebody who works at J-Curve about the Agile, and this because I'm really interested in it. I mean, I did work experience with Move for it, and I thought it was really cool. I mean, like just working in that environment is really enjoyable. And I know a lot of firms are starting to adopt this kind of thing, and I really want to get involved with it. Probably, I think, when I'm older. But yeah. And you can see how it sort of pertains more to financial institutions, because I know from speaking to the guy who works at J-Curve, or the founder of it, it's with financial institutions, the struggle that they're having is that people don't want to unlearn it. Like, people have to unlearn Waterfall projects. So when you've got these big successful people who are like, who have worked for like 60 years or whatever, and they've never had any troubles with it, and you come on and you're like, oh, here's Agile, come and do this, reinvent your whole organization. They're obviously going to be pretty resistant to it, and they're not going to want to do it. And I think that's a lot of the challenge with implementing Agile in sort of modern organizations. And I know, especially with finance, like this is so prevalent, because it's things like finance is like almost renowned for like just doing things the same way they've done it, especially in banking for like 100 years. And like if you can get them to like there's so many organizations, like there's up and coming like financial institutions which are starting to do it and actually using it as a competitive edge. And if you could get big banks to actually do it, like they're already quite restricted in terms of what they can do regarding like against fintechs, that sort of thing. But if you could get them to be more agile, they'd be like so much more efficient. But yeah, sorry, yeah, thanks for listening. A little bit of a rant at the end there, but yeah, got any questions, let me know.